Hi everybody. I think we're going to get started if that's okay with everybody. It is 6:30 and I know a lot of people are itching to watch the England game tonight. So it's really quite important and that we stick to time, but also a really, really big thank you for those of you that have joined us. It's really, really important to us that we are making sure that our children at GSAL are protected as much as they can be when it comes to injury prevention. So I'm going to crack on. I'm going to start and then introduce Jenny after a couple of minutes. So I'll just start sharing my screen. Just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, so like I said, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Hetty Vors, Mrs. Vors for the pupils, and I'm the Head of Wellbeing in Sport. We've joined up with Physio Action, teamed up with them, which is a brilliant company that are supporting us in our injury prevention work. I'm just going to run through slightly what we're going to be covering and also a little bit about what we do here at GSAL to support our pupils. So on the call tonight is Mr. Kevin Shattuck, who's head of our athletic development programme, Jenny, who's part of Physio Action, and myself, who is head of wellbeing in sport. Just some faces to the names there, some nice cringy pictures for you. So just a little bit of a run through really of how we are looking at injury prevention at GSAL as a priority in sport. So first of all, our athletic development programme is a really substantial one now and headed up by Kev. He's done an absolutely fantastic job in giving our pupils opportunity to use the gym, to have really good strength and conditioning sessions with him and Miss Cuthbert, along with the lunchtime rehab sessions. So we have before school, lunchtime sessions after school, and mainly the lunchtime rehab sessions are really, really good for those athletes that need to come and attend and get some rehab or prehab done in school. Secondly, we're actually moving to a physical literacy curriculum in our core PE. So we've got a core PE curriculum now, which is very much separate to our games programme, which is a really substantial games programme with lots of different sports. Our physical literacy curriculum focuses on movement competency, so moving well, which will really foster this injury prevention that we're really trying to create at school. Obviously, our student support service team, the nurses in there do a really great job in providing us some insight into those pupils that are injured, to give us risk assessments and for pupils to go to for first aid treatment. We're also much more aware on our register function now. So as teachers, we're all aware of different types of injuries as it's pops up on our register at the start of every lesson, which has been really beneficial for us as staff. We've appointed two new roles, so Head of Athletic Development in Kev and myself in Head of Wellbeing in Sport, who can really prioritise either our injured athletes or injury prevention and ensuring that the overall holistic health of our athletes is at the heart of everything we do. And then we've also got a really, really strong warm-up provision now, which is being kind of taken to all of the different sports in all different lessons to really ensure that injury prevention is really substantial. We've created a new partnership with PB, who are a sports bra company. They actually came in last week, a really successful first visit to ensure that every girl is fitted with a sports bra over the next year. And it's a really, really important initiative in order to, again, another really, really important part to prevent injury in our female athletes. And then obviously tonight is all about our Physio Action partnership. It's a really, really important one to us, and hopefully having more physios on board and obviously Jenny's amazing expertise, who I will hand over to now, is going to be really beneficial for us at GSAL and for obviously the pupils who are at the heart of everything we do. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Jenny, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about Physio Action, what they can do to support our pupils, and lots of information about injury prevention. Over to you, Jenny. Thank you.
Perfect. So let me just share my screen. Let's go. Welcome to everybody that's joined the call. Thank you for coming before you watch the England match. So hopefully we'll be done adjusted and you'll be all ready for that after this. So as Hetty's already said, I'm Jenny Frostiger, one of the specialist paediatric physios at Physio Action based in Harrogate. But we've got a wealth of other physios covering clinics, Chapel Allerton, Ilkley, and in Leeds at the David Lloyd. So even I'm not available in Harrogate, there is other physios around, so we're all happy to help. So tonight was just a little bit about giving you some information about how to stay strong, grow stronger, and play smarter. Hopefully try and prevent any pre-season niggles, and also to try and give you a bit of information as to how to, I suppose, stay as strong as you can be and stay doing all the fitness and PE levels that you want to do with all the sports. So a few goals for tonight's sessions. So one, to help prepare children know their bodies and to stay strong. What to do after a period of reduced sports or inactivity. How to help prepare your children as also parents, teachers for the sporting year ahead. So yes, I know we're coming to the end of this school term, but really important for starting in September. And to help, how to help prepare your child for the year ahead and also over the summer. So things in that will be what training will be involved for their chosen sport or sports, how to recover, when to rest, how to eat and stay healthy, and appropriate fueling. So what you're eating to help stay injury free, because it's obviously really important. So how do we do this? Always useful to know. So number one, at the beginning of each week, month, or even obviously the start of the summer holidays, you want to kind of sit down and have a chat with your child or children and note down kind of if there is any pre-season training, what that schedule will look like. And certainly when they go back in September, if they're coming into year 7 or likewise any year of any primary or secondary, what their kind of training schedule will be in terms of maybe not after school clubs, but maybe in PE, what kind of level of homework they're going to start with if they haven't been doing homework up until now, when they're going to fit their meals in, really important when they're going to fit their rest time in, and how that's going to look with competitions, events, galas, but then also exams and end of year exams and things like that as well. And obviously it's not just sport in that respect. They might be doing performance or other activities outside or inside of school. So there's kind of a busy calendar of events already. Number 2, always have a little bit of a brief discussion of, and with the coaches, of how hard the session should be and how they will eat appropriately for each training session. So hopefully the coaches or PE teachers will be given a good idea of, is this a training session? Is this a baseline kind of assessment time? Is it actually this is the pre-season for selection? And also when are these training sessions happening and how are they going to eat and prepare them? So is it something at school in the afternoon? So do they need to have an appropriate lunch? Is it something in the evening? Have they then got time to eat after school before they go to the club? Or if at the weekends, obviously, are they getting up early enough to fuel properly? So hopefully all these things will help reduce levels of injuries. And number 3, you obviously want to gradually build up the amount of sport that they do and the training duration to help prevent things like sore feet, sore shins, sore knees within those first few weeks, especially of starting a new term. They might be wearing new shoes, which obviously may or may impact how they're walking and how that might feel. But also if you're going to go from summer with doing minimal activity to then coming straight back into September and doing everything, sometimes it doesn't always mean so, but it's more likely to happen in those first few weeks because of that period of inactivity, and then also moving forward how much they add on. So a few things that probably everybody's well aware of, it's just whether we actually act on them. So usually injuries occur, or the work that I've done with Angela Jackson on the Kids Back to Sport programmes is the capacity of your body and it's usually the exceeding of that capacity of the body when something happens. So as you can see on the picture diagram, either your capacity is really reduced or the load has increased beyond the capacity of the tissues, and that's where your body usually is when the injury appears because it can't deal with the extra load. So it's just, you want those kind of weighing scales to be in the middle. So everybody always asks us, can children overtrain? Can they do too much? I think that's yes for children and adults. Everybody can overtrain. There's always that ability to do that. But hopefully when you've got given enough time in the training and their body can have chance to adapt and deal with those high volumes of activity and repetition, then technically they're not overtraining anymore because they've trained to do that extra level. But as I said, and I'll keep saying, it's really important that the body has time to rest, recover, and then to strengthen. Otherwise, they're not having that ability to adapt as efficiently as they could do. When they're tasked with increased exercise levels, your body will adapt by laying down extra bone and muscle to help strengthen itself. But it does take time to do this. And yeah, time is always the biggest healer, but hopefully it shouldn't have to heal if you're giving it time to repair and recover. And often, as it's kind of said already, injuries occur when we have not given our bodies time to adapt and to strengthen. And that's kind of the times that this is what we're trying to bring to the forefront, is not overtraining or doing too much when you're not ready. So I like all these different analogies of pictures. It helps me learn better. But listening to your body. So I'm not sure on this call whether we've got lots of children or sitting with your parents, but it's often how you feel and whether you're telling anybody about that. So whether that's your parents, whether that's your grandparents, or whether that's your teachers, or whether that's Mrs. Vors that you're going to. But you kind of got that scale of 1 to 5, where how tired do you feel? If 1's minimal, well, that's really good. But if it's 5, then that will impede or affect how you are managing that training session. How sore, maybe if you're had muscle pains or anything like that, how sore do you feel? And how grumpy, because often if you're grumpy, it can suggest that you're going through a growth spurt. It can just suggest you're not getting enough rest, you're not having enough fuel. But again, all of those 3 things together, if you're hitting 5, 5, and 5, you're probably not going to have the best time at training or doing any of the activities, just because you're not listening to your body. You're almost in that red line of that battery because your body is needing more time to rest and recover. With that in mind, sleep is really, really important for injury prevention and performance. And if you're not getting enough sleep, it's going to predispose you, so put you at more risk of hurting yourself. And I suppose that is the same for adults and children, but especially when you're growing, it's absolutely important. So as you can see here, it starts on the columns with 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 hours of your average sleep per night. And if you then see your likelihood of injuries up on the left side, and if you were you want more than 7 hours, but you can see the reduce of the likelihood of injury massively reduces when you have 8 or 9 hours of sleep. So that gives your body time to rest, recover, and heal, which is really vital. So all the literature is obviously pointing towards having more sleep. So how do you get the best night's sleep? Because you could all go to bed at 6 p.m. but not fall asleep till 9, which obviously then is not counted in the hours of sleep. So a few pointers as to how to make this better. So if we go around the kind of the circle of the recovery, a quiet environment will always really help. Maintain room temperature. Now it's very, very hot today, so it's just making sure that you keep in the room nice and cool, because if you are really hot, you're going to be more restless and not probably get asleep as quickly. Things like ensuring your bedding doesn't cause an environment that is too hot, so you can change duvets to sheets in this weather, or no sheets at all. Sleep routine. So often people will say this when children are babies, but actually it's really important to keep a routine going throughout life. If you go to bed at a consistent time each night and wake up at a similar time, then that your body clock will get used to that, and obviously that will help you get sleep and get more efficient sleep. I didn't ever used to drink coffee or tea when I was younger, but some people do. But avoiding caffeine late at night, or any fluid, drinking and eating too much just before you go to sleep, because obviously then you're not having time to digest it, and often then you end up going to bed with tummy pain, so you're not going to go to sleep with that. And not having a late nap either, because I know sometimes if you're traveling from events or after PE, it's late at night, and if it's warm, you often fall asleep in the car, so you've got to try and avoid that. Big, I suppose, as social media gets bigger, you want to avoid the use of computers, tablets, TVs, anything blue light just before you go to sleep, just because your body and your brain needs that time to rest and recover, and not be staring at a screen where obviously you're just not able to switch off, I suppose. We've mentioned the napping again. Obviously a morning nap, if you really are that tired on a weekend, then fair enough, but not later than mid-afternoon. We've said about the 7 hours, and the final one, ensuring your dark room with no light source present. Now sometimes that is harder to get than others if you don't have blinds and curtains, but as best as you can is all that you can ask for, really. So moving on, fuel your bodies. I know a lot of children, when I say, are you fueling correctly, don't really follow what I'm trying to suggest. So here's a few pointers. I know we've used the rainbow traffic lights to kind of help with all the different levels of fat and protein and carbohydrates. But if we go from the top, so you want to try and help your bodies to produce the best performance they can. And if you can do as much preparation as possible, then you are putting yourself in the best chance of managing your PE lessons, of managing your after school clubs, of managing your extracurricular clubs, of all the other clubs that you can manage. With that, you need to eat, I suppose, the right healthy balanced diet with the correct nutrients and fuel to help your muscle and bones repair. Obviously, when you when you get a bit older, you might start to check ingredients lists for yourself on every food and drink. And the top figure usually shows the biggest component, and usually that's in lots of snacks. It's the sugar. You do need sugar, but just not always a massive amount. Traffic light labeling. So you can eat occasional saturated fat or sugary foods, but everything's in moderation. So it's not that you can't have any treats or no snacks, because sometimes chocolate is important and sugary things, but just not all the time. That can't be your only fuel, because it's really short-lived and it won't fuel you for the rest of the event or for the PE lesson or for the club. And I also would think is keep things interesting, try out new foods and combinations, especially on training days. So it's not a match day, it's a training. To find out what works for you. So your recipe for success. It might not be the same as your friends. It might be very different to your friends, but there's lots of big teams out there, especially in the cycling world, that have different menus for different people for different events. So a hill climbing session will be different from a road session. And obviously, if you're swimming or anything like that, it's different for longer journeys and longer durations of sport. So you've got to be excited about what you eat, because then you'll be more likely to eat it. And usually sometimes if you have a training plan that then you added something else for a match, it might make it a bit more enticing to eat it. So that will help. A little bit more just on nutrition. That does involve hydration. So you need to constantly replace water. And obviously when you're sweating, you're going to lose a lot of that hydration. So you need to replenish it. Protein and carbohydrates should be 50% of your diet in whatever way you want to get that. Obviously, vitamins and minerals comes in your fruit and vegetables. And obviously keeping healthy maintains your brain function and helps your bones grow stronger. So that's what we need. And just at the bottom right here is just a little bit of a diagram as to you should be eating a meal kind of 2 to 3 hours before a match or a training plan or anything where you're obviously involved with that. You can have a snack or a banana up to 45 minutes before, and then it's really important that refueling 30 to 60 minutes afterwards to help kickstart that kind of road to recovery. Even if you are not injured, you still need to refuel, because injuries is not the only time where you need to be managing it, it's to prevent it as well. So refueling is really important. So we move on to your overload issues. And I've mentioned the September, but obviously we're just coming into summer term, so it's really important to kind of be aware of this. That sudden spike of increasing your activity levels, growing sporty children really struggle to cope with that. Often because you've had a lovely long rest over summer, and then you come back in September and obviously all the wonderful sports that are available to you, or if you're already in a club or a training session, you know what's coming, but your body suddenly has to go from nothing to it's like 0 to 100 straight away. And those are the spikes of that overload really that we're trying to help prepare you for. So it's not just a stop start, it's kind of we're always doing some activity, which is healthy anyway, but then we can then pinpoint it and do more when we get to September. So we mentioned a little bit at the start about how to prepare for that. So planning your year ahead, knowing what's coming up when, if you know when trials are, if you know when so maybe have a academic when your exams are and when things are important in that calendar, but also from a sporting perspective, if you are doing lots of clubs at school and then after school clubs, kind of how that's all going to work in, and rest times as well. Coaches will be able to help you with competitions and events or galas, but sometimes you can't plan as well for those because you might not know which teams you're in until nearer the time. But exams, you will know this. And it is something to be aware of, that even if you don't think you suffer with stress or anxiety, sometimes it's very internal and you don't know how much that affects you until the competition. So it's not that I want to bring up that you will be stressed or worried, it's just more an awareness of it that will be affecting and helping to plan for these increased spikes. So I had a bit of a think about what I would probably suspect or suggest over the summer for pre-season. And it's kind of, even if you're not in a club that trains over summer or a regular club, you still don't want to finish school in a few weeks and then have to do absolutely no activity and then start back in September, because everybody will be at the same risk. So have a rough schedule each week of what activity or training you want to do, and complete that with each sport that you are known to do. So some clubs might provide this over summer. You might have a few weeks off and then you might have a lighter amount of training. Other people will know when you're going on holiday and when you're coming back. So you still need to try and do some of that activity, but absolutely nowhere near as what as you will do in a normal term time, but don't just completely drop that. Health and happiness is really important, and the summer holidays, as any holidays, it's really helpful, and it's really important to catch up with friends and family that you might not normally do because you've got more time. That will also help you prepare for your pre-season, even if you don't think it is, because that feeling happy and will release happy endorphins, and endorphins that make you happy will help with your training because you'll feel better prepared. It's really important, as I reiterate, that you get enough time for recovery in the off season, because you certainly don't get lots of time for resting in the on season. And it's also a good chance, especially if you're going on holiday doing different things, or you're lucky enough to go on holiday, to try new activities, to try different sports, so that you're not just doing a singular sport all the time. It's usually sometimes nice to try something new, because you won't know kind of until you try it whether it's something you might like. Other things, just do keep some routine to your usual sport to maintain that level of conditioning. And I know strength and conditioning is talked about a lot nowadays, but conditioning means how well you perform in the sport that you choose. And if you don't keep that level of conditioning, then, as I said, it's just harder to pick back up when you have, after, I don't know how many weeks off it is over summer, but it's just harder to pick back up. So try and keep that conditioning level good. And then again, consider plan days out to be active. So you don't have to do activity and sport every day. There are other activities and hobbies that you can have, but try and plan. So if a day or a week that you think, oh, not much is happening that week, is there a day that you could go swim with your friends, or a bike ride, or, you know, go do a park run or something like that, or a junior park run and things like that. So just ideas to try and keep you active over summer. So we mentioned about training, and I again use this picture diagram from Angela Jackson. It's should you train or not? And again, if you're doing pre-season training, this will be over the summer holidays. And if you're not, then it's something to go back to in September. And it's all about you as your children, or if the parents are listening to this, them speaking to you about or sharing how they feel prior to each session. So obviously they need to be training to get into clubs, to get into teams, but obviously going through growth spurts, different things happen, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But if you think with the batteries about the 20%, 40% and 100%, if it's full, so if you're ready to train, you're enjoying it, knowing that they are fully prepared to enjoy that and their body is ready for that training session. If they're at that 20% or even the 40% and feeling quite low in mood, low in energy, that could be after a growth spurt, which again is hard to know when a specific growth spurt has happened, but it's a thing that do happen. And they might have been poorly, they might have had poor sleep, so whether it's been something else has been on their minds, their bodies are at a reduced capacity. So if they are, I don't know, for example, going to go do the bleep test, then if they're feeling at 20%, then they're probably absolutely not going to perform at the same level as they would do if they were ready and 100%. So that's just a communication important need to either yourselves, the parents, or to Mrs. Vors, or to any of the athletic development team, to Kevin, because that if you're not communicating that prior to the session and you're mentioning it afterwards, or even the weeks later when something hasn't gone your way, then that would have probably been something that the wellbeing team can help support you with, and either put it on a different day or try and support you through that. So it's just working on, could you do something else on that session rather than that assessment time, you know, working on tactics, techniques instead of that high intensity session. So this is all putting the responsibility on the child as well as their parents, if that's what they're telling you. But if you don't communicate how you're feeling and how your energy levels are, then it's really hard to support you through different training sessions if people don't know. And it's okay to do that. And just an example of all sessions aren't equal. So you've got one where you're still half asleep, and I'm sure early morning clubs probably go with that, especially swimming when they start at 4 or 5 in the morning. Not sure I could do that. All the way up to 10 where it's jelly legs and you don't feel very well at all. But the coaches and the PE teachers and all the club coaches will give you a rough outline as where you're meant to be trying to gain towards. And obviously whether you can get there or not depends on how you're feeling in that day. But it just to suggest that not all sessions have to be the same. So hopefully nobody gets injured, but it's obviously a thing that happens. So what to do when a child is in pain? Our aim, especially with Physio Action and as parents, is to get your child back as safely as promptly as possible to the sport they love. The amount of time off is obviously affecting their mood, and they will not be probably having a very happy time if they're not playing their sport. So again, we mentioned why it might have happened. So when our bodies have exceeded the capacity of the muscles, bones and tendons, something usually gives, they might not have had enough time to rest, recover and strengthen. And sometimes you can parallel or map that to a specific time that have been injured in the past. They might have had a period of poor sleep. They might have changed. You might have moved house. You might have changed bedrooms. Something else might have changed. Nutrition, because obviously we all learn to eat different things at different points, and illness is quite a huge one, because obviously when you're poorly, depending on what it is, you don't tend to eat and drink as well as maybe we should do normally. We've mentioned overtraining, we've mentioned spikes in activity, and there's also, especially when you start new clubs or new schools and there's loads more options of lots of different sports, it is great that you have that ability to try things, but try and resist that temptation to do everything all at the same time, because if your body's trying to do 10 different sports, they're not going to be you're not going to achieve the I suppose the efficiency and enjoy all 10 sports necessarily at the same time. So maybe try a few less and then build up to work out which ones that you like to do, just to try and reduce that chance of getting injured. Unfortunately, we're all growing, so children are growing, and that obviously is a big risk of causing injuries without you doing anything else. Growth spurts there's an increased chance when children are growing that this may well lead to an injury, and adjustments and adaptations again take time, that magic word of time. When you are going through growth spurts, there is more tension around where the muscles are attaching via the tendons to the bone. There's an increase in capacity, which can cause irritation of the tissue and the growth plate. Obviously, you can't see those, so it's quite hard for the child to know what's they're feeling. It can be a pain that's localized to that specific area, but not specifically the tendon that it's affecting. It's worse when they're doing maybe high load activities, running, jumping, hopping, and it eases when they stop, so it reduces when they stop. And this is known as an apophysitis, so the itis is the inflammation. So this is very common. It's just what to do when these happen, and knowing that growth can cause these injuries. So the three main areas that I thought would be useful to talk about, heel pain is the first one, where your Achilles tendon attaches into the calcaneum bone. This is linked to something called Sever's disease, but I think the literature nowadays is trying to move away from these labelled names. So heel pain is an inflammation where that tendon is attaching into the bone. It's very easy to diagnose. As a health professional, you don't necessarily need to go for scans or x-rays or any of the investigations. There's a simple test that we can do. And again, it's quite a manageable condition to treat, and they do grow out of it, which is useful to know. Knee pain tends to be quite common, sometimes more in boys than girls, but again, it affects everybody. And again, you might have heard of Osgood-Schlatter's disease, it's just a mouthful to say, or Cinderglasen syndrome. And again, there's not that. It is important to know that those are names, but again, just focus on that it's where the quadricep muscle attaches to the top of the shin bone. It can cause small swellings, again, because these are inflammatory processes caused by repetitive forces. And again, it's often increased pain on increased loading activities, so like your jumping, hopping, running, any high impact, and will ease at rest. So again, it's something that we see quite often, and it's very easily managed. It's just getting that right management plan in place at the right point. And finally, the last third one, the back, so your bone stress injuries, which sometimes people know a little bit about, but not a great deal. And I think people hear fractures, bone fractures, and think, oh, crikey. But it is, we like to think of it more as a bony bruise. And it is, again, really common during rapid growth, and where the bone cannot tolerate the sudden increase in load. So we'll just talk a little bit more about that now, just because that's often really people that are worried because you hear fracture. So the lower back is the common site for these. Majority around specific arching extensions of the lower back. Gymnastics, cricket are key ones to kind of focus on there, but not the only ones. Correct management. So if you understand that this is really important, but bone understands it needs to be strengthened. And yes, once it's bruised, but it needs time and rest from sports to achieve this. So the common thing that with correct management is at least a minimum of 2 weeks of resting from all sports. So it's not just the sport that it hurt at, it's all sports. And with that period of 2 weeks, you would hope to have some improvement at the end, if not no pain at all. And then later in the slides, we'll kind of talk through what would then happen. But it's up to 6 weeks to give that chance healing, and then no other intervention would be required. Unfortunately, if a child sometimes doesn't want to tell you that they've got a niggle in the lower back, if they're going to miss being selected, or they just don't want to miss sport, which is common because who wants to miss sport, and the niggle continues in their lower back, what the risk of that is the bone hasn't got time to heal. It hasn't got a chance to heal, and so therefore it can't repair and it can't get stronger. If that happens, then there's that risk of a small fracture to be the outside surface of the bone, which is when it will stop, and actually you're out for a lot more in terms of months from sport. So as much as it's uncomfortable and frustrating to miss sport at the start, 2 to 6 weeks is a lot better than 2 to 6 months out of sport. So again, it's just all about the correct management, and it's not here to scare anybody. It's just, if we can manage when things happen well, then it will help get you back to sport quicker and stay in that sport that you love. And yeah, so just that kind of a bit more of a process really. Back pain in sporty kids is bony bruising until it is proven otherwise. So what that means is you're seeing a health professional, speak to the wellbeing team, mention when you have any worries. You rest from all sports for 2 weeks as a minimum. If the pain reoccurs, you would come and see a health professional, so either someone like myself or your GP or your doctor, but a health professional would probably be at hand quite quickly to see you. And then we would investigate, and that's when we would discuss kind of whether we need further investigations with x-rays or scans, but we would guide you in that. Then the most exciting bit is getting you back to sport. So from the bottom up to the top, so you walk is the bottom bit. You've got to select an activity level that creates we ideally want no pain, but nothing more than 2 out of 10. And you start gradually building up the time and effort as you go. So you move to the next step once you complete each step with no more than 2 out of 10. So it's very minimal to no pain for at least 2 days in consecutively training. So ideally, I know the cricket kind of plan is to leave a day between sessions initially, but right at the start, and then as you get stronger and get more conditioning back, you can then build up that. But however, you've got to understand the step ladder. If you experience pain greater than the 2 out of 10 for more than 1 hour after activity, or if it was worse the next day, you've got to drop back down a level on the activity steps and then gradually keep building that more in effort and time at each step. It's just giving your body more chance to repair and recover. But I think these slides are all going to be made, and it's a recording anyway, so you can always come back to look at these, and we can talk about it in clinic if everybody needs an appointment. So I've talked a lot, but key messages there. So main ones, and they're all in there for you to see, listening to your body, but also listening to your body and telling someone, parents or coaches, teachers, whoever you feel you could talk to, or as health professional as well, or the nurses at your school, because if you're not communicating how you're feeling, and that's obviously going to affect your training and your participation, then it's harder to help you if we don't know. Prepare for success rather than failing to prepare and preparing to fail, which is key motto for every sport and anything in life, I think. Correct fuel, so making sure that your diet is of the correct healthy balance and all those other bits in between, going back to those other slides. So environment, number 4, and internal and external factors. So internal factors are things that you can do to help prepare for competitions. External, you can only plan. You can't plan as well for those because you can't affect those. So you can't plan for the weather, but you will know kind of the surfaces that you're playing on and necessarily the team that you're playing with, but you can't obviously affect everything with external factors. Number 5, maintain that conditioning. So we're saying even when injured, you can obviously still work on specific plans just to help keep the conditioning in other limbs, so that you're not completely just resting from doing everything. Ideally, as everybody, we want to keep kids playing sports because then you're usually the happiest. Enjoyment, you have to be doing this all for enjoyment. I don't think I know anybody that plays sport just because someone tells them to. So enjoyment is key. And obviously working together as a team, whoever it is that you can communicate with will obviously help make the process a lot easier and more enjoyable. We have added in a slide here for concussion, but it's not a focus for tonight because it would probably be a presentation all on itself. But I know from talking to Kevin and Hetty when I last came in that you follow all the protocols and the procedures anyway with school. There's a lot on the rugby and football unions websites of up-to-date literature, as I'm sure your school have all that up-to-date anyway. But if there is questions from that, then we can obviously redirect them later or do another presentation if that's helpful. And finally, Rachel, one of our other managers of Physio Action, has given us the link for the England Rugby, and it's a really good welfare toolkit on lots of different things: menstrual health, breast health, pelvic health, and puberty. So that's that QR code that can be scanned, and it's really good for up-to-date information, which I think is really keen because it's really difficult, some of those topics, to talk about out loud or with your parents or health professionals. So it's something that, you know, especially if you've got phones or can access it, it's really helpful to do. And I think just some other links back to our website, lots of things on there. I'm a kids back to sport practitioner. So Angela Jackson has done a lot of work trying to get kids understanding how they can help themselves, as well as parents learning more. I'm also a member of the Association of the Paediatric Chartered Society of Physios. That's what APCP is. So if you look onto that, there's lots of information on there as well. And also the Harrogate Health Hub was developed in lockdown when I worked at the hospital, and there's a specific paediatric section there, which is anything from babies up to adolescents, up to 18. So it's really good as well for information. There you go. Thank you for listening. And any questions, but I think Hetty might help lead in this, or we can always write them down and see what you want to do.
Jenny, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. I hope you guys will all agree that hopefully everything Jenny covered there, you know, from the importance of sleep to fueling our bodies, it is really, really, really key. Before we wrap things up, if anybody has any questions that they want to put in the chat function, I know that there's somebody that wrote about growing pains, but I think Kev was going to cover. I think Jenny had covered the growing pains issue from the start, and then Kev's just going to jump on that. That'd be great.
So you might just need to unmute you. Sorry. Yeah. Just feedback. Or do you want me to mute? That's better. Oh, still no feedback. Oh, come on, yours. So it was just one in the message or the group chat, Jenny. And you talked about when a child maybe gets injured, stress fractures, etc. But what could parents do when children are saying they've got growing pains? They're going through what someone like myself would call peak height velocity, that massive growth spurt that kids go through. So not necessarily a trauma pain or a pain caused through injury, but, you know, the bones, the muscles, the tendons are growing at a rapid rate. What would you recommend in that scenario?
It's a really good question, and I think sometimes it's worthwhile knowing, as Kevin always suggested, when like you're hitting that kind of peak height velocity, because girls, it should be anything around kind of 11 up to about 14, usually a year or two after their first period. So you just got to kind of work back from that, whereas boys, it's anything between 14, 15, 17, so it's a bit later. And then thinking about, you know, peak mass velocity usually happens after that. So having that awareness first of the ages of when you might be expecting this. I'd also, as a side step, or regularly measure children's height. So usually every kind of 3 months would be great, but most people do it either halfway through the year or every year, because anything over 7 centimeters in a year, you'd be worried that that's quite a massive, big, you know, growth spurt. I would think it's more about planning and preparation around those times that they're saying about being in pain or being uncomfortable, and then looking at the load of what training is that week, what PE is it that week, how much are they putting on their bodies, of not necessarily overloading, but what load are they putting on that week, and maybe trying to dial it down a little bit. So not saying completely rest and not do anything, because then they'll have too much time to focus on the pains, but absolutely try and reduce the amount of load. It might be that the fueling might need to be increased, so how much food you are providing. They might just be a lot hungrier that week. Hydration as well, so making sure all of that is improved, making sure they have more sleep and more rest and recovery time. So I would almost just say reduce the load, so they're not completely resting from everything unless they feel that that's important, or at least resting from some of the more high impact activities, so that they have got more time to rest and recover. I mean, I don't tend to, a lot of parents say, oh, Calpol or anything like that doesn't tend to do a great deal. I think that's personal preference. Some people it works well for, but I would say go for the fueling, sleep, rest, recovery options first and reducing load, and then see whether that's even needed, if that's helpful.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Jenny.
So we've just got another one that's very similar to that, Jenny. My daughter always complains about her legs as she's growing. Would you recommend that she stops attending clubs every now and then, or carry on? Usually parent puts ice on it or heat to help her, but it's that question of, are you encouraging that stop? Or as you've just talked about there, do you try and encourage participation still, but looking at a reduced volume or reduced load?
Yeah, I think absolutely spot on. Unless it's, as I said, when we mentioned about the back, so that's slightly different management. So if it is where we think the lower back, and that is specific management, that does require rest completely. But if it's more the leg pains where it kind of coming and going, and there is times where it is not painful, I would say absolutely just reduce that load first, because that might in turn help anyway. The heat and the ice, brilliant. They might find one helps better than the other. But it's just making sure that there's that emphasis on rest, recovery, time to sleep, time to rest. As I said, increasing the fueling, but I would say reduce the load first. And obviously, if there's a holiday coming up or there's a big event planned, maybe have more like every other day off. Have that day in between where you do rest, which is what we would have said for the back to sport anyway. But yeah, reduce the load and then try and give every other day that chance to rest.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jenny. If nobody else has got any questions, I will wrap it up there. I've put my email address in the chat and Kev's for anybody who wants to direct any questions directly to us, and that's absolutely fine. Look, we're more than happy to help, and I'm sure Jenny is as well. And please do direct those questions towards us, because I think as well from that presentation, I think it's really, really important that the key thing is here that we take away is that we communicate. It's got to be at the heart of everything we do, and I think communication's got to be key. And I think pupils have to be willing to communicate with staff communicate with our pupils, but also parents keep us involved, because it's really, really good to know kind of where pupils are at, and checking in is better than not checking in. So that is really, really important for us. It's an absolutely vital topic in terms of injury prevention, and our key aim is to really look at the athlete as a whole, the holistic athlete, not just how successful they are, how talented they are, but how can we really support these children who are in our care for a lot of the time, as a whole, and that's really, really important to us, and I hope that's come across. A massive thank you to Jenny for joining us tonight. It's been really, really informative. Again, direct any questions to us, and if anybody, I think that's kind of, I don't think anybody else has asked another question, so I think we will wrap things up there. Thank you so much, and take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
See you. Bye.